It happened under the cover of darkness, when most families in Nassau County were asleep. Just after midnight, flashing red and blue lights flooded suburban streets as heavily armed FBI agents, ICE officers, and local police stormed into homes. By sunrise, 42 suspected gang members, men authorities described as hardened killers, were dragged out of their beds, shackled and loaded into armored vans. This was not just another police operation. This was one of the largest coordinated anti-gang takedowns in Long Island history. The suspects were not kids pretending to be gangsters. They were battle-tested veterans of MS-13, the Trinitarios, and the notorious 18th Street Gang. For 4 straight days in August 2025, Nassau County became the center of a war on organized crime that officials promised would make history. But while law enforcement celebrated this as a surgical strike against terror in their neighborhoods, the deeper question remains: did this raid mark the end of a nightmare, or did it light the fuse for an even bloodier gang war? Before we move on, your single subscribe click powers the hard work that goes into every video here. In July, an 18-year-old boy with mild cognitive issues was walking through Kennedy Park in Hempstead when 4 MS-13 members mistook him for a rival. What followed was a scene ripped from the darkest chapters of Nassau County's past. The gang cornered him, tried to rob him, then slashed him with a machete. 2 attackers chased him on foot while 2 more pursued in a car, determined to finish the job. Bleeding and terrified, the boy somehow managed to outrun his would-be killers and reach a hospital. He survived, but the message was clear. This wasn't a feud between rival gangs anymore. Innocent residents were once again at risk of becoming another shallow grave, just like the 9 decapitated bodies unearthed back in For Nassau County leaders, that was unacceptable. The machete attack transformed fear into fury, and it set in motion a sweeping response, unlike anything locals had seen in years. Within days, federal and local agencies moved in. Between August 13th and August 17th, Nassau County launched a 4-day blitz. Day 1 brought 10 arrests, including 4 18th Street members and 2 from MS-13. On Day 2, officers stormed safe houses and cars, seizing weapons and arresting 14 more. Most of them MS. Day 3 saw 9 more suspects, 5 of whom were caught mid-robbery with loaded machetes and firearms. Day 4 wrapped up with another 9 arrests, this time targeting Trinitarios and 18th Street affiliate. By the end of the operation, 42 men were in custody, 33 of whom were immediately flagged for deportation proceedings. Evidence tables lined with machetes, handguns, masks and even miniature axes were displayed at a press conference, described by one police chief as execution kit. For officials, the spectacle wasn't just about arrests, it was about sending an unmistakable message: gang activity in Nassau County would no longer be tolerated. But behind the celebration, the raids also revealed uncomfortable truth. Many of those arrested were linked to a larger drug trafficking conspiracy. Authorities discovered that imprisoned leaders, some tied to the Mexican mafia, were directing operations from inside U.S. prison. Weekly shipments of methamphetamine were being purchased and distributed across Long Island neighborhoods. It was proof that these gangs weren't just street crews. They were part of a national criminal network. And while Nassau officers were rounding up machete-wielding enforcers, the FBI was busy chasing a far bigger target. On the same week as the sweeps, federal agents captured Joel Vargas Escobar, known on the streets as Momi. Escobar, a ruthless MS-13 leader connected to at least 11 murders across Nevada and California, had been hiding on Long Island for years after being deported back in 20. His arrest highlighted the porous nature of America's gang crisis. Deportation wasn't a permanent solution. Leaders like Escobar slipped back in, rebuilt their networks, and escalated violence. His capture was hailed as a victory, but it also underscored a haunting reality: this war was far from over. The timing of the raids also carried heavy political undertone. ICE officials reminded reporters of Donald Trump's early promise to go after the worst of the worst. They held up the arrests as proof that promise was being fulfilled. The ages of those arrested ranged from 18 to 50. Men with long rap sheets of stabbings, shootings, trafficking and home invasions. These weren't petty criminals, they were soldiers in an ongoing war. Officials vowed that in Nassau County they would be prosecuted, incarcerated or deported. Yet critics asked the obvious question: Why did it take another machete attack on an innocent kid before such a massive crackdown was triggered? And just as importantly, what comes after? Law enforcement may have pulled 42 men off the street, but history shows gangs always adapt. For every arrest, replacements are waiting in the shadows. For every deportation, there's a path back across the border. And for every seizure of weapons, more machetes and guns flow in. To understand the deeper danger, you have to look beyond Long Island. MS-13, Trinitarios and 18th Street didn't start in Nassau County. Their roots run back decades to deportations from U.S. prisons into El Salvador, Honduras and Guatemala during the 1990s. Gangs exported from Los Angeles brought U.S. prison culture, violent hierarchies, and control through fear. They didn't just settle in, they conquered. Central America became one of the most dangerous regions on earth outside of war zones. In Honduras, women were massacred inside prisons by rival gangs who smuggled in pistols and grenades. In El Salvador, neighborhoods became militarized zones where families paid rent to survive. The brutality trickled north as migration surged, and eventually machete-wielding teenagers recruited in Hempstead or Brentwood became shock troops for international cartel. That's why the machete attack in Nassau wasn't just a local scare, it was a symptom of a global network of violence that stretches from suburban parks in New York to morgues in Central America. Officials framed the Nassau raid as a decisive blow, comparing it to a whack-a-mole game where gangs pop up and enforcement knocks them down. But community members weren't celebrating just yet. Parents still walked their children to school, fearful of recruitment. Residents remembered the shallow graves dug in 2017 and knew those horrors don't vanish in 4 days of raids. Even as crime numbers temporarily dipped, everyone understood gangs thrive on revenge. Police chiefs warned that retaliation was possible, admitting that if these men didn't leave town, their next stop would be prison or deportation. But whether that's deterrence or escalation remains an open question. History suggests gangs often respond with violence to reclaim lost ground. Nassau's midnight raids may have won a battle, but the war remains a cycle: arrest, deport, return and repeat. The truth is, law enforcement can drag 42 gangsters from their homes in a week, but unless the root causes, poverty, corruption, drug demand and cross-border trafficking, are addressed, replacements will keep coming. That's why this story isn't just about one boy's narrow escape or 42 men in handcuffs, or even one fugitive leader named Momia. It's about whether America can break a cycle that has turned suburban streets into war zones and international borders into revolving doors. So was Nassau County's 4-day blitz a historic victory, or just another chapter in a forever war that the U.S. has no clear plan to end? That's the haunting question left behind after the flashing lights faded, after the suspects were locked away, and after families in Hempstead tried to sleep a little easier. The machetes may be off the streets for now, but the fear hasn't left. And as long as gangs like MS-13, the Trinitarios and 18th Street thrive on both sides of the border, Nassau's midnight raids may prove to be just the beginning. Thank you for watching. If you found this video informative, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss future deep dives into crime history and global events. And now I want to hear from you. Do you think raids like this truly dismantle gangs, or do they only fuel the cycle of violence? Share your thoughts in the comments below.